But it took one professor from ACDP, and he lodged an objection with the IEC. And he said, how is it possible that you can have 1,000 people voting for this party, and then at the national level it's a completely different thing? So the person who was changing at the provincial level forgot to change the numbers even at the national level.
Here we are again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to WorldView. This is the #1 media company where we explore everyone's perspective on things that can broaden our own worldview. Today we have no other than Tselane. If you don't know Tselane and you're South African, I'm going to get really, really worried about you. I've known Terry for many, many years. So I have to admit he's somebody I really love like a brother. It doesn't mean that this is going to be a sweetheart interview, because I don't do sweetheart interviews. Terry, my brother, good morning.
Good morning to you, man. And wonderful connecting with you and to your listeners.
Thank you. And thanks for making the time. Terry, you know, it should be unjust to start telling the story of your... First of all, I can't tell the whole story of your life, because I know when I first encountered you, you were a senior to me, first of all, at Wits University. You were one of the most visible student leaders, and up there with microphones and saying what needed to be said. I think as we got older, you've also kind of passed that baton to me, because I was too shy then. You said what needed to be said so that there's change, you know. And I mean, thanks to people like you, we got to know, you know, and you, many others. You've spent time in jail. You spent time hiding from the police because of your outspokenness, speaking truth to power. Then, now we live in a different era where we have to speak truth to the people that we thought were there for us, unfortunately, and they turn out to be not quite as we expected, for many of us at least. But your journey, you've been CEO of Gauteng Tourism, or was it Johannesburg? Gauteng Tourism. Gauteng Tourism. You have been in the education sector, right? You have been for many years. You also you were one of the senior leaders at the Electoral Commission. I struggle to call it an independent electoral commission because I don't believe it is, but its formal name is the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa. I think it's just an electoral commission in my view. And you were deputy there. You left almost similar, the same way that the Khambo Seneke didn't quite make it to the top of the constitutional court in South Africa. You left before you could become chief electoral officer. I'm interested to know what happened there. But and now you run your own independent electoral outfit. You've done some amazing work in parts of Africa. You're connected to that fraternity in South Africa. I see different political parties call upon you to help them manage elections. Tell us about all that.
Yep, I'm not too sure exactly where to start, but thank you very much for having me.
Maybe start where Terry is. Where Terry came to where he's at, and what your perception is of the evolving South Africa over time, especially in regard to what your expectations were.
Yeah, currently I am the executive chair of the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa, IMSA. So what we do, we manage the elections, we provide training. We basically are an organization that is providing support in democracy and electoral space. We support election management bodies wherever they require our assistance. But we also run the elections. I've been running the elections for quite a number of political parties, for medical aids, for SRCs, and we do this either manually or electronically. So that's in short what we do as IMSA. And of course, you are correct in terms of where we find ourselves as South Africa. That unfortunately our expectations have been dashed. We really had high expectations when we were students and student activists. We thought that, once we get liberation, everything would have been sorted out, and that we will be rejoicing in what we have actually fought for and what we've actually been able to put together. But unfortunately, there are many weaknesses in our current system, corruption being one of them, and then also a situation where it appears that those who are in the leadership favor people who are pliable. So they would want to appoint people that they know they can control in every aspect. Even though you've got independent institutions, and they are independent really in terms of the constitution, but if those organizations are flooded by people who are pliable, who can be manipulated, then those institutions start losing the independence that they're supposed to be heavy, because in the first instance, people who are inside them are the one who compromise their own independence by being pliable and being controlled elsewhere. Those are some of the challenges and the difficulties that we currently find ourselves in.
Can the system self-correct? We hear people say there'll be self-correction of sorts. I mean, is there such a thing as self-correct? Do you see attempts, especially since the arrival of Ramaphosa, to really sustainably, irreversibly, turn things around?
I really don't think that President Ramaphosa would actually be able to deal with the challenges that South Africa has. And I think it is largely as a result of his also management style that he prefers to, he has prioritized a political party and appears to want the political party to be at the center of change. And then he seems to think that in order for him to be able to bring about this change, he's got to start by changing the party from within. And then once he's done that, then the party will be able to change the society. But that model won't work. Firstly, even the people who elected him to be the president within the party, daggers are all out against him. They want to get rid of him. And then therefore, I don't see how he will be able to change the party. And then if he can't change the party, because his model is premised on changing the party and for the party to change the society, I don't see the change in society therefore happening.
But I mean, someone like yourself, even me, when, at the dawn of our democracy, when the ANC came back home, I was excited. I'm sure you were excited. I remember the first time I saw Mkhonto guys march at the FNB Stadium. I was like the most excited guy. I can't explain the emotion, even though they didn't march quite the way the Chinese or the Russians march. Some went that way, others went that way. But I felt we're going to be safe at last from the SADF. I mean, this is your ANC, Terry. How do you feel today? Do you still feel we can save the party, or have you turned to let's save South Africa? I mean, the party will be what it will be. How do you separate party and state, given that you've been so much integral to the ANC?
Yeah, as you correctly pointed out, I mean, I joined the Mass Democratic Movement, which was part of the ANC. Because remember that the ANC was a banned organization. So most of us could not identify with the ANC openly because then we would be arrested. We therefore became part of the United Democratic Front and continued the struggle under the banner and the leadership of the African National Congress. And therefore, most of us have really been groomed under the culture of the African National Congress. We espoused everything that the ANC espoused, all the aspects that are there in the Freedom Charter, we identified with them. We believed that the Freedom Charter was going to be implemented immediately when the ANC came into power. But of course, as we now know, that unfortunately, there are so many things that have actually intervened in between. Some corruption, some people who are gatekeepers, who do not want people who have got different opinions to them, and then they happen to be in positions of influence, and then therefore they can actually be able to keep those that they don't want outside the system, and therefore, those individuals would then not be able to make any interventions or contribute towards the changes that we all want. And then I think that's where the decay started within the African National Congress. It's corruption, and then secondly, it is the gatekeepers.
It's also impunity. Too many people are still in positions that they shouldn't be in anymore. For all the things that have been associated with, people are still working around as lawmakers. They at Electoral House, and there's arrogance as well that they're untouchable.
No, absolutely. I mean, those are some of the aspects that have really made the organization to basically lose focus. That those weaknesses make it difficult for the ANC to change the society. And so, therefore, and then you may have heard the former president, Kgalema Motlanthe, saying what needs to happen is that the ANC must lose power in order for the ANC to find itself. And I think there is some kind of credence to that kind of an argument, because then what it means is that you need a completely different vehicle to bring South Africa to take South Africa to the next level. The African National Congress played a pivotal role in terms of bringing about liberation. But I'm no longer convinced that in its current form, it is an organization that is actually going to be able to take South Africa to the next stage. We need something completely different, to be able to move to the next stage.
So to you, there's no good ANC and bad ANC anymore. I mean, if you look at what's going on in the elections of the coming electoral, the elective conference of the ANC, do you have any preferences in terms of who should either continue or take over?
I don't. Incidentally, I've been helping the ANC veterans on what they call one member, one vote. Right. Where they're trying to create a system where every member of the ANC will be able to determine the leaders of the ANC, so that the issue of vote buying becomes something of the past. Because currently, when we've got 5,000 or 4,500 delegates sitting at Nasrec, it is much more easier to buy votes by targeting those few individuals who are there. But if you introduce a system that enabled all 2 million members to participate in elections, in electing their leaders, it was going to be extremely difficult. At the moment, money does play a role in terms of determination of leadership. And therefore, I'm not convinced with the current arrangement that it would actually be able to bring about something different. I don't think there is a single person who's going to emerge out of that conference without having used financial resources, sizable financial resources, in order for them to be able to emerge. It's going to be difficult, therefore, to keep on believing that there is something new that is going to emerge from that conference.
So, you mentioned Kgalema Motlanthe. Kgalema Motlanthe is for me a very interesting character. To him with Thabo Mbeki, even though much of the road, the degradation of stuff happened under Zuma, Kgalema Motlanthe oversaw the undoing of the Scorpios that everybody has been calling back for over the years. He also fired Advocate Vosip Pikoli, who was then the National Director of Public Prosecution, very respected, very much following the law. Mbeki suspended this man trying to save Jackie Silebi. Don't you think Kgalema and Mbeki should apologize? I mean, Mbeki was the first post-apartheid president to interfere with the criminal justice system. And Motlanthe was the man who was leading the way to pave the way for Zuma. I remember that Mbeki suspended Motlanthe, he suspended Pikoli. And while Pikoli was still under suspension by Mbeki, the ANC removed Mbeki. The ANC sent Motlanthe to Pikoli. They said, look, Tutu, we are prepared to give you your job back on one condition, so you don't touch the old man, Zuma. And Pikoli said, no, I can't do that. I have to act without fear, favor, or prejudice. Then Motlanthe threw him under the bus. So surely Motlanthe can't walk around now as an old sage who has the answers to South Africa's problems. He must face up to South Africans and say, you know what, I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. But remember that all the leaders of the ANC are prisoners of the organization. In other words, they are bound by the framework of the organization. They are bound by the resolutions. They are bound by the ANC. So when they took a decision in Polokwane to disband the Scorpions, there had to be someone at the helm who was going to be implementing that resolution. So Motlanthe happened to be part of that leadership. He was the interim president, and therefore he had to implement the resolution of the ANC, which was to disband the Scorpions. And then again, if the NEC had taken a decision that Piccoli or somebody has got to leave, he was going to implement that because he's a prisoner of the same organization. So of course that does not mean that he is a saint or Mbeki is a saint, but we still have to listen to some of the things that make sense that are coming from them. In spite of the fact that at the time when they were presidents, they were still imprisoned by the framework within which they were operating. If they say something that makes sense, we can't just dismiss it on the basis that there was a time when they made those mistakes. Well, of course, those mistakes are monumental mistakes that really took the country to where it is today. And then we cannot just gloss over it and pretend that they never made those mistakes, and that they've got to own up to that because they were the leaders at that time who implemented it. And I'm not justifying anything by saying that they're prisoners of the organization and that they've got to operate within the framework. They have got their own agency. They're supposed to have been able to say, yes, I've got to be able to do this because it's a resolution, but I don't agree with it.
But okay, I mean, I suppose in the same vein, Zuma could stand up and say something good, and we should just listen to him. This man has messed up South Africa. But anyway, look at Ramaphosa, the ANC NEC of the Cadre conference the policy making conference decided that we're going to nationalize the Reserve Bank. I mean, if I give Ramaphosa credit for pushing back against it, I think nationalizing the Reserve Bank would be disastrous. Many of the arguments that people put forward that it's in America, in other places, it's nationalized, but in South Africa, under people who've devastated every institution, they want to create another institution. You want to put another institution under comrade cadre deployment and destroy it. And they're really surely, and there are people like Tema Maseko at some point, many others who said no, even though the party I love says I must do this is not good for South Africa. Even, I mean, the same thing that reciprocally, many of these guys grew up in the ANC. They would not have occupied those senior strategic positions had the ANC said, yeah, we can trust that one, we can trust that one. Look at the advocate, what's her name? The former protector, Professor Tuli Madonsela, she also grew up in the ANC. But at some point, she said, wait a minute, I have to put country first. So there are those individuals, despite what the ANC is not always right. And what is good for the ANC is not always good for South Africa. What is good for South Africa is not always good for the ANC.
You are so correct. Someone was saying actually that the majority can also be wrong. Yeah. And then the fact that, the ANC being a majority party does not make every decision that they've taken to be the correct decision. And then there are many of us, as you correctly pointed out, who never accepted the status quo or the direction where things were going. We were able to resist, even though we knew that there would be negative consequences to our own lives. But we still took decisions and then stood firm in relation to those decisions. And then therefore, I agree with you that there is a need in life for someone to be able to stand for something and then be prepared to sacrifice as a result of being able to stick to a principle. And President Ramaphosa, even though he has not implemented the resolution of the Reserve Bank, it is one of the things that they keep reminding him of. And when he's going to a conference, we don't know what the consequences is. It's going to be in relation to non-implementation of some of the conference resolutions. But if the majority of people feel that he has not actually been able to deliver, they may still remove him. But here is a difficulty with President Ramaphosa. At some stage when he was asked a question about, having to differ with the ANC, he said, he would rather fall on his sword by defending the ANC instead of actually, going with the country. So you never really know exactly which Ramaphosa is acting and when, and then what forces him to be different. I mean, to differ with the party, and then what forces him to agree with the party all the time. Whether all the things that he's doing, it's because he agrees with the ANC and agrees with all those things, or whether he's being an independent person. You will never know with President Ramaphosa.
Do you think the problem is he seems to be trying to be loved by everybody, and when you're a leader, you can't be loved by everybody. He seems to be, he doesn't want to displease anyone, but leadership sometimes is a place where you have to be, or there are moments when you have to be lonely, so there's got to be a little distance between you and the people that follow you. Not a big distance, because you need to be accessible. But you've got to be able to say, guys, Mandela was able to say, I'm going to have coffee with Betsy Favur. People say, are you mad? You can't do that. And he said, I'm going to do, let me tell you why it's good for South Africa that I do this. Even when those guys wanted to get rid of the Springbok emblem, he said, no, we don't. The Springbok belongs to all of us. So if he was a president who wanted to be loved by everybody else, yeah, comrades are saying this, let's do it, right? So sometimes, if you don't have a backbone, if you're not strong, if your self-esteem level still needs to be brushed in the right direction, you can't be a leader, especially of a country as diverse as South Africa.
This is such an important thing. And I mean, if you look at the presidency of President Ramaphosa, unfortunately, you will find those elements being dominant within the society, where he's supposed to be taking firm decisions. We don't know what direction he's taking. He tries to sit in the middle of the road, right, instead of actually being able to take the decision. It also translates, for instance, in the foreign policy of South Africa. You've got now a situation in Ukraine, and then you don't know what South Africa's position is in relation to that. Mandela, when he was asked the question about Gaddafi and Fidel Castro, he said, "Those are my friends, and you must not think that your enemies." Yeah, he said, "You must not think that your enemies are my enemies, and you've got to live with the fact that these are my friends."
Absolutely.
Why are we not able to get a word from South Africa where it says, Putin is our friend, and then therefore, yes, we want the resolution to be multilateral structures to be able to deal with the situation in Ukraine. But if Putin is our friend, why is President Ramaphosa not able to say Putin is our friend, like Nelson Mandela said, with those people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mandela also did the same with the Dalai Lama. The Chinese tried to put pressure on him not to welcome and meet the Dalai Lama in South Africa. He took him to Kirstenbosch, walked around, took pictures with him. When he came for the second time after Mbeki, there was agreement that the president was not to meet him. The president, Mbeki, never met. The Dalai Lama came, he was never met. And then he came the third time. Mutanti was acting, and think he didn't come. His visa application was frustrated. But the Dalai Lama has been living in India all these years since 1958, when he left Tibet, when he fled his native Tibet. The Chinese have never said to India, because we're hosting this man, we're not going to be friends with you. It's about backbone, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's capacity to be able to stand for a principle and being able to pronounce what that principle is.
Correct.
And then we're not saying side with NATO and America or side with Putin. We're saying if you have a position, you've got to be able to defend that position. You've got to be able to pronounce it, articulate it, and say, this is my position. So Mandela was able to do it, but unfortunately, we seem to be, getting lost into trying to be nice to everybody, and then therefore end up not really knowing what our real position is.
This is a very interesting perspective. Thank you, Terry. And I mean, if you look at South Africa's role in Africa, at first we came as the big guys, the new guys who were going to lead from the front and everything, but we lost it also. We defended despots. We defended Mugabe, we defended al-Bashir, we defended Museveni. Those guys are still messing up. So we tend to care about human rights elsewhere, but in Africa, human rights are trampled upon by men, mostly men who look like us. I mean, even when a number of years ago, there was a UN resolution on protecting the rights of LGBTIQ plus communities around the world. Those rights are already enshrined in the South African Constitution and Bill of Rights. We protect them in South Africa, but we abstained from that resolution, from that vote. And when the minister at the time, it was Malcolm Tamatamani, she was asked, "But why did you guys take such a stance?" Her response was, "Well, we South Africa don't want to be seen to be walking too far ahead of our African peers." I thought that was nonsense.
I mean, remember that Mugabe particularly did not like Mandela. And then why didn't Mugabe like Mandela? Because Mandela again was, what do you call it? He was firm in his position that there is a need. There is a need for Mugabe to allow human rights in Zimbabwe, to allow his people to be able to choose freely without any repression. And then it is on the basis of that that Mugabe did not really like Mandela that much.
Okay, so I mean, what do you think South Africa's stance should be in Africa?
Well, South Africa's stand in Africa must always be that of having to reconcile different groups, but at the same time must be able to provide leadership in terms of in terms of democracy and human rights matters. And then the reason why we've got to take that road is because South Africa sacrificed a lot, and then many countries sacrificed a lot for us as South Africans for the liberation that we eventually received. And then therefore we've got to be able to pay back to the African continent. And the only way of paying back to the African continent is by making sure that there are institutions of democracy and development that will be able to help the residents of different countries in those different jurisdictions.
Okay, so let's go back to you. At some point, a chief electoral officer, you left, and there was a bit of a split between you and someone like Gauteng Tourism. What happened there? Are you prepared to talk about that?
Well, I think the people who are unfortunately in the leadership sometimes of organizations who don't understand the Constitution and then who don't understand the role that they're supposed to be playing in relation to those institutions. Now, IEC is a Chapter 9 institution, and then the ANC, the leaders of the ANC should understand they are a governing party. And there's a distinction between those two, that they are a governing party, they're important, and then this is what I told him at the time when we were having this issue, because we went to the House as the commission to raise these issues. And I said to them, they must remember that they are a governing party, the custodian of the resources of state, and that we, as the commission, we are an independent commission established in terms of Chapter 9 of the Constitution, and that there's got to be no interference in the way we are doing things, especially by those who are supposed to be the custodian of the resources of state. And unfortunately, as I've indicated, sometimes you have people in the leadership who basically think that just because they are a government, and therefore every person must be able must do everything that they do without actually understanding the impact that they have in relation to the independence of those institutions. So that Minister Mandashe and Jesse Duarte unfortunately did not seem to understand. It appears to me that Mr. Mandashe since then has moved a little bit, seems to now begin to appreciate the role of this institution. But at the time when this was happening, they basically disregarded the independence of the IEC, and unfortunately, I happen to be one of those people that would not bend the rules, and then because I could not bend the rules, I ended up being a fall guy, and then people believing that I am a problem at the IEC.
Are they, I mean, obviously, senior leaders of the IEC are political deployees, right? I mean, is there some kind of briefing at your telehouse? Hey, comrade, we're going to send you over there. This is what you expect from you.
No, not at all. Incidentally, when I was appointed, I never spoke to anybody from the ANC. I was not approached by anybody from the ANC to make myself available. I just decided on my own to make myself available, and then I was appointed, and then nobody came to me even after my appointment to say, "Hey, this is what we expect of you." And then I think it was commendable that nobody actually came to me to tell me anything about how I'm supposed to be.
But Terry, with due respect, you were a safe ANC cadre. They saw you as that. If Solim went, if you and I applied for this at the same time, they would look at this and say, no, not that one. So they trusted you, just like they trusted Tuli Matonsela, just like they trusted Tema Maseko, just like they trusted all these people. You were safe guys. And so they didn't expect you to turn around and say, guys, yeah, I still love the party, but I love the country first.
No, you're correct. Probably history played a role to say, we know this person, he's been part of the struggle, and he's been part of our movement, and therefore, he will be able to implement what needs to be implemented.
Right.
So I can't deny the importance of history in everything that we do. The reason why you've got a CV is because people are going to be looking at elements of your journey and see as to whether those elements of journey are in line with what they want. And then therefore, if my CV, someone was looking at my CV with a history and the credentials of the struggle, and then look at yours in relation to this position that I occupied, probably they were still going to be going for me.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, yeah, absolutely. So then it's easy, I think, or safe to assume that the people, you didn't make it to the top because somebody said, this dude is not going to deliver for us. Somebody else made it to the top. Then we can assume that the person who made it to the top was seen to be safe.
No, it is true. In fact, by that time, I had already been labeled the enemy of the ANC. Judge Duata told me in my eye that they regard me as the enemy, as the ANC. And then, when you are told that you are the enemy of the ANC, it means you can't expect to be going anywhere because those who are in government believe that you are the enemy. Yeah. And then I kept asking this question to say, what is it that I have done, alleged to have done, said, or alleged to have said that makes you believe that I'm anti-ANC? And then she was unable to explain it. She was unable to articulate it. On 3 different occasions, I raised this issue with her.
I mean, you have this incredible pedigree, not only from a political history perspective, but professionally, you've done some amazing things. Surely the IEC of today should call on someone like yourself, especially because you continue to be involved in electoral processes as an independent. Do you have a relationship with the IEC? Would they call you for your expertise, for assistance?
No, I don't think the IEC particularly likes me. And I don't understand, particularly because I've sacrificed so much defending the integrity of the institution. I would have thought that they would regard me as a resource that they can actually rely on. But instead, they tried to push me away as far as possible. I mean, recently, as in about 2 weeks ago, they had a meeting here of Association of World Election Management Bodies.
They didn't call you?
I did not even crack the invite. And yet, I established this organization. I'm the one, I served in the executive of this organization for 8 years. Even after that, I was drawn in as a senior advisor. As a senior advisor, I am the one who pushed for South Africa to host a AWEB conference. And the conference comes to South Africa when they know that I'm around. But they decided, no, I don't deserve to be invited. I just saw it in the media. Maybe they think I'm a liability. I don't understand why they think I'm a liability, but sometimes I appreciate it, that there is a distance between myself and them. And then therefore, when they do things that compromise the integrity of that organization, people are able to make a differentiation between myself and my leadership, and in how I operated with integrity and how they are operating right now.
Yeah, look, I mean, you know the only one. Many people. I've been through that. I've been told that I'm an enemy of the revolution. I don't know what that means, and but it seems to me that we have people then who work in these institutions at senior level, who either from hearsay, say at the IEC, for example. I mean, you left the IEC 4 or 5 years ago, so there's a bunch of new people that are older ones. Surely, if the attitude has not changed towards you, it means that there's a word of mouth that gets passed on from one generation of leadership to another. But with Terry is untouchable, right? The same thing happened to me in other areas that there was solely this, and other people. I mean, so how do you? So it's almost like they want to please somebody. So I don't think it's like every day somebody at Lutuli House says, "Hey, remember, you don't touch Terry." It's like something gets said about you in this, about me or the people in these institutions, where they say, "No, no, you can't touch that one," so and so will be unhappy.
Absolutely. It shall appear to me as well that people are fighting battles they don't understand. They were told at the time that Terry is fighting with Jesse and Mantashe, and on the basis of that, he's fighting the ANC, and therefore we want to get rid of him. You must not have anything to do with him. But nobody came back to them and said to them, guys, the script may have changed. Terry now is a good guy, you know.
He was never a bad guy. He just said what needed. He just put the country ahead. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, so it appears that people are still operating on the mandate that they were given at the time when they were given that mandate,
right?
And is going to be passed on from one generation to the next until we have very firm, independent thinkers who are going to be saying, "Hang on, why don't we actually use this?" Because I actually commentate on quite a number of issues related to the elections all the time on television and radio, as well as, you know, I do write articles as well. As, you know, someone would actually, you know, an independent thinker would say, but there seems to be something that we can draw on from this person.
But do you think the IEC of today is safe from political interference?
You know, I always try to move away from that particular question. And then the reason why is because it is going to give other people a reason to say, that's why we don't want to work with Terry, because Terry has got an opinion that is negative about us. You know, so I try to stay away, not respond to that particular question, and saying the IEC will have to prove itself out there, whether they're an independent organization and whether the individuals who are there can actually be able to operate independently without any interference from anybody.
Okay, so last year you and I differed majorly on a point. There was this drive by sections of the population, many of them ring to Zuma and some people in the ANC to cancel. And I call it cancel because if you postpone the elections, you know, well, if you postpone the election, they must be held within the next 3 months or so, right? But if you say let's postpone to 2 years later, you're not postponing them, you're canceling elections. Now, you were of the view that the local government elections should not be held last year. I insisted they should be held. We've had good in the national local government elections. The world did not come down. Do you regret having pushed for the elections to be postponed?
No. I don't. I don't, because remember that my position was based on a few things that were happening. I was saying, firstly, if there is no free political activity, how can you call that a free election? Because the political environment influences greatly whether the elections are free or fair, free and fair. Now, here you had a situation where parties, because in any case, they're already in parliament. And because they're in parliament, it means the system would always favor those people who are already inside. What about Terry, who wants to establish his own political party? How is he going to be campaigning? Where is he going to be campaigning for? So basically, saying that you can proceed with the elections under those circumstances meant that you are basically saying, maintain the status quo. because
Well,
it is only those that are in parliament whose voices are known.
Well, you are
And
proven
not-
wrong. But you are proven wrong. The elections happened, the status quo was not maintained. Other countries around the world had elections even soon after or at the tail end of COVID restrictions. The thing is, the kind of people who agreed with you on the elections needing to be cancelled, including the IEC, by the way, you guys, I mean, they went to court to try and make a case for the elections not to happen. The EFF didn't want elections to happen. They were pushing for them to be combined with the national elections in 2024. It was rubbish, okay? We have had elections, they happened. The guys who are dominant didn't win. I mean, they lost a number of many municipalities. Look at these coalition parties that have happened. It's a good thing. Surely, Terry, even you should say, okay, in hindsight, it's not a bad thing that the elections happened.
No. It was not a bad thing that the elections happened. But I'm saying, I was looking at two aspects. I was looking at the aspect that I've already mentioned, and the fact that people are dying of COVID. And then I specifically said, postpone the elections with 2 months, with about 6 months, in order to be able to allow, what do you call it?
Campaigning.
Not only campaigning, but for people to have developed the immune system against COVID, and for gatherings to happen. Now you are saying, and then I was asking only for 6 months, specifically in order to allow for those two things to happen. Now, you are saying that the status quo was not maintained. The status quo, in my opinion, was maintained in a sense that people who changed are the people who were in parliament. It was the same organizations. The only organization that managed to get in there for the first time is ATM with 1 seat. So you can tell me that ATM's voice was actually going to be listened to when they did not have a forum.
No, but we're talking about the local government elections. I mean, look at the municipalities, all the changes that
No. Remember that what my issue is. My issue is you were not going to be able to get a person or a party that was completely outside the establishment to get in there. So whether you are now having coalitions of political parties that have always been in parliament. No one from outside came in. So
Action SA made some inroads.
Yeah, no. You're right. Action SA made some inroads, and I think on the basis of that we can just. And then Action SA, by the way, they only targeted certain municipalities in Gauteng, and they said we're going to go for metros, and then we're going to go for metros
because they didn't have money to go all over the country at the time.
They didn't have money, but they did not have platforms as well to be able to speak to the electorate.
Right. Okay.
Can you imagine how much leverage they would have had if they had the capacity during that particular period to campaign throughout the country?
Well, look at the DA has been around for many, many years, but it didn't do really well, did it? So it had the force or the advantage of being existent already in national parliament, of having a national footprint, but it didn't necessarily do well during the local government elections.
No, they did well in the sense that they're still official opposition. They're still controlling quite a number of municipalities that they control. The fact that they were in parliament gave them an advantage. If they were not in parliament, they could have been worse. Maybe. But all I was saying is that I was trying to be a spokesperson of independent people outside there who want to come in and then who want to be able to campaign. And I'm saying these people's rights have been interfered with, not because government had actually gone all out to say that they're going to be doing that, but because the pandemic affected them and the restrictions affected them. And therefore, you could not find those independent voices coming in.
Do you agree that whatever happens in December with the ANC Electoral Conference, the 2024 elections must happen? Actually, for too many people, they're too far. They have to happen. Nobody must come with excuses to say no elections in 2024.
Absolutely. And I've been saying, the fact that they're dilly-dallying in finalizing the bill, the electoral amendment bill, and then now they developed something that is so unconstitutional. that I don't think is going to pass the constitutional muster, it's going to be a problem, because there may be people who actually don't want those elections to happen.
Right.
But the people of South Africa are yearning for change, and then they see the 2024 as a pivotal moment in the history of South Africa. And those elections have got to happen. They must happen, and we must not have any excuses. And hopefully, Parliament will not actually create an excuse by passing legislation that is going to be a challenge in court.
Right. Terry, you are now, I think, chairman of Gauteng Tourism, Johannesburg Tourism, or something like that?
Of Joburg Tourism, yes.
So does it mean that the ANC is slowly embracing you back? Are you the prodigal son who is coming back home, who has come back home?
Incidentally, Johannesburg is under multi-party government. It's led by the DA, and the ANC is in opposition. So I was appointed by a person from Action SA, who is part of the multi-party government. In Johannesburg, we never know which one is still in power. Tomorrow it could be the ANC again. They were there for about 5 days. But I believe that,
is there interference? Is Johannesburg Tourism able to do what it must, despite all of these changes?
No, I don't think there is any single organization that is able to operate properly within the dynamic changes that are taking place at the political level there, because remember, everyone comes with their own mandate. We were told to reapply for our board membership, and then we did. Now, after we submitted the applications, there is a reversal of that, and then the new guys are saying we are proceeding where we left off. Everybody back to their stations. We ignoring the applications. So there is absolutely no way that we can actually operate.
So do you report to the MEC for tourism for Johannesburg, or what is it? Economic development.
MMC of economic development.
Okay. So we're going to finish soon, Terry. I know that the SACP, South African Communist Party, and the MCOSATU, South African Congress of South African Trade Unions, they are integral partners to the ANC in the tripartite alliance. They govern South Africa. Some of them become ministers and big conscious in parliament without even going through a direct vote. But that's what it is. That's the system we have. And these people tend to be used by the IEC and members of them, say SADTU, at election, as electoral officers and so on. I mean, can we trust them that they will be neutral, or they can be neutral? I mean, surely they want to maintain the status quo. Shouldn't the IEC work differently?
I advocated for that when I was part of the IEC. I said, let's remove the teachers. Let's get unemployed graduates, because there are many of them who are unemployed. Let's get the young people who are all over here to be part of this organization, to be running the elections. And there was a resistance. In fact, it's one of the issues that Mantashe hated me for. And then he told me that there is no way that they will allow teachers to be removed. By the time I left, we had reduced the number of teachers to about 10% of the electoral staff. And then we were still pushing, I was still pushing for the complete removal of teachers. And then some were saying, no, the reason why we can't do that is because we are using the schools as the voting station. So let's have at least a teacher from that particular school to be a presiding officer for that school, so that they can hold, they can be able to open the schools and then make sure that there is nothing wrong happening at that particular school and all that. But my position has always been, these are state resources. If the IEC has got the responsible person, that responsible person will be able to make sure that there is no vandalism in that particular school for a period that the elections are taking place. And that we should remove teachers. And I still stand by that particular
I
position.
mean, those teachers are deployed by SADTU. It's not like SADTU doesn't get involved. The South African Democratic Teachers Union, does it? They get involved in who gets appointed in those positions, doesn't it?
Not in the IEC, but SADTU does play a role in terms of the appointment of teachers in particular position, including principals. So if you're saying you're going to be working with a principal, it is possible that that principal could be a member of SADTU.
No, the same SADTU who doesn't want, which doesn't want its members to be evaluated, but the discussion for another day. So I mean, there's still a lot of work and I like that you said earlier that it's up to the Electoral Commission to demonstrate to South Africans that it can be trusted. They still have a lot of work to do in that regard. If you were to be brought in and we were told to change two things at the IEC so that South Africans can trust it more. I'm personally very happy that there's a lot more scrutiny on what's happening at IEC. Not enough, but there was a time when we trusted this organization, when you guys were there, very blindly. If you were to change two things, what would they be? Ahead of 2024, apart from the electoral bill, they have to make sure. I mean, what would they be?
It's a difficult question that cannot be answered in two ways. But firstly, you've got to change the culture of the organization, and then secondly, you've got to deal with the issue that we've just discussed now. Make sure that you've got only independent people who are actually operating in the organization at all different levels, including at the voting station level. Make sure that there are no perceptions of people who come from particular trade unions such as SADTU managing or co-managing the elections with the IEC. Make sure that the IEC is as independent as it can be, because once people have got confidence in an organization, it becomes much more easier to manage the processes of the elections.
One last question, Terry. Okay, one question to you. Give me 2 or 3 or 4 ways to steal an election before, during, or after the election.
There are many ways of stealing the elections. The first one, it is through the voters' roll. You can steal an election by making sure that only those that support your party register. Because if you're not registered, you are not going to participate in the process. So you disadvantage areas that you don't regard as your stronghold by making sure that they don't register. And then you flood the registration with people who support you. That's the first one. The second one is that you introduce repression in different areas to make it difficult for people to go to the voting station. And then the third one, which is the traditional one, you stuff the materials in the ballot boxes that are pre-marked. So you get people who are going to be managing the elections who are agreeable with you. And then those who are agreeable are the ones who are going to be pre-marking the ballot papers to make sure that, you get to the voting station and then that, the elections outcome is already determined. So those are some of the aspects that we can actually use. You can change also the information. You can change.
The IT system can be manipulated.
If your party has got 1,000 votes and my party has got 100, I can change the numbers.
Oh. Okay, but you need people who are pliable within the, say, IEC to help you do that, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what about the transportation of ballot papers and the storage of them? Is there a risk? There are the weaknesses.
Well, there is a risk. I always say that logistics play a very important role in terms of determination of integrity of elections. If you go to a particular area, there are no enough ballot papers. You move from that particular area, you go to another, there are more ballot papers than you actually require. So you discourage people from certain areas to participate in the electoral processes. You make materials available in certain areas, you make not available in certain areas. That is part of what you could actually, that could actually interfere with the integrity of the process.
Generally speaking, you don't have to be specific. Has any of these things happened? Have any of these things happened in the South African electoral history since 1994?
Yes, that happened.
Okay.
We had in KwaZulu-Natal a person who was actually sentenced eventually to 10 years because he was discovered having stuffed the ballot papers that are pre-marked in the ballot boxes.
Oh.
And then
Wow.
we had in Johannesburg here where the presiding officers just swapped the votes because they know that you won't know, I won't know. If I know that there are 3,000 people and then the numbers still reconcile in that particular area, I won't know. But it took one professor from ACDP and he launched an objection with the IEC. And he said, how is it possible that you can have 1,000 people voting for this party, and then at the provincial level, it's a completely different thing, or at the national level, it's a completely different thing. So the person who was changing at the provincial level forgot to change the numbers even at the national level. So so you could see it was so clear that an organization that got 200 votes, now all of a sudden at the national level they've got 1,000, and at the provincial level they've got 200 votes.
So basically wearing a fancy cap made in China and a t-shirt and observing elections, people coming in, queuing, going through, and nobody claps somebody else, it's not enough. Things could happen despite all the semblance of peace at the electoral station.
Absolutely, there is a lot that needs to happen for people to be able to understand exactly what is happening at the voting station level. And unfortunately, there are many people who don't understand the electoral processes, but they are observers. So they go to the voting station, they are there for 30 minutes, they leave, they go to the next voting station. They don't know actually what happens when they've actually left that particular voting station, and they go and pronounce that the elections were free and fair.
I mean, don't you think we need one last question? I know it's so hard to let it go. Don't you think South Africa needs an independent, and I mean truly independent, not people who is an institution staff with employees, an independent body to teach people, South Africans, about democracy, how our constitution happens, even when the Electoral Act would have been amended. Somebody who doesn't come in and do the teaching with a bias towards or against any political party. Don't you think we need a system like that?
No, absolutely. There is a need for an independent organization to do vote education and civic education in our society. And that organization must actually be able to show the weaknesses within the system in order for people to be able to identify. But also participating in the election, it's not about just telling people where to put an X. It's about giving people the power to exercise their agency in the electoral processes, so that no one can come to them and say you won't be able to get this on the basis that you didn't vote you have voted for one party or the other.
Okay. Tselane, I would like to go on forever, but I know that you have other things to do. I really appreciate that you made the time to be here with me today, and I'm sure we'll hopefully know that we'll have other occasions to do it again, in person or through this medium. Thanks again, my brother. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Have a nice day.
Okay, you too, man.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Viewers out there, if you've come this far in this conversation, it was a fascinating one. As you could see, I was struggling to let go of Tselane. There's so much that still needs to be said, to be discussed, to be scrutinized, to be explained to South Africans in terms of how voting happens and the role, the responsibilities of each one of us who participates in elections. There's a lot of work that has not been done in South Africa that needs to be done. So this is a conversation that needs to happen again, maybe with Terry and one or two other people, so that we have a more rounded conversation. But Terry was obviously the right person to have because of the position that he's held in the current Electoral Commission in South Africa. So if you've come this far, you've obviously liked this discussion, and I hope that you will continue to just subscribe to WorldView, to the channel. Those of you who are keen to advertise on WorldView, please write to us at worldview.help@gmail.com. This is Solomon at WorldView. Thank you.